They get laughed at for their haircuts, their horses, and frankly, their entire way of life. But the Amish have 90% less autism, 35% less heart disease, and half the suicide rate than general population. Maybe it's not the Amish that are stuck in the past. Maybe it's us. Let's dive into it.
The Amish have one of the most fascinating lifestyles in the US, staying away from modern technologies and living a very simple life. The Amish are a group of people derived from Swiss Germany who follow a traditional Christian church and make a living from manual labor. They migrated to Pennsylvania in the 18th century and are still living the same lifestyle today. The Amish are primarily known for three things: living a simple life, wearing plain clothes, and avoiding any kind of modern technology. It's pretty amazing to still see a group of people living like this, especially in a consumer-driven society like the US, where everybody's always trying to get their hands on the latest technology and gadgets.
Throughout history, we've always been racing towards the next thing, the best thing, the innovation. You know, looking at the Amish, looking at the low time preference health benefits, or at least limited scope health benefits that the Amish have, are they actually happier? You know, they're probably healthier with less autism, less heart disease, mortality. They have certain benefits to this way of life. Is this better, or should we actually, you know, want to move forward? I was about to say produce, but like, frankly, they are producing. They earn a living with manual, hard labor. The question becomes, what can we really learn from the Amish? And of course, we're gonna turn to the all-knowing, the podfather, Joe Rogan.
The Amish, they seem happy, which is odd. I think there's like very low instances of autism, mental health disorders amongst the Amish. It sucks to say, but I think working hard all the time is really good for people.
That is such a good take. And it does suck to say, because the American dream that we're sold is come, work hard for a little bit, and then boom, you have your whole life to reap the rewards. But when you actually look at what it does, I mean, looking at, especially in men retire and they go crazy. This midlife crisis, you know, even post-retirement, where they get fat, they get lazy, and their life just boom, drops off a cliff, their quality of life does. And I think it's because we stop working, we stop pushing ourselves. Collectively, I would say they're known as some of the hardest working people on earth. They have constant purpose, they have a constant mission, and they're not inundated with dangerous tech.
It keeps you focused on something positive and productive.
Yeah.
When people get too much time on their hands to think and do absolutely nothing else, I mean, you see what happens.
Yeah, these dudes are out there pulling a wagon with a horse, making butter and
Never
shit.
seen Netflix. This might be the only group we can kind of shit on.
I love that finish. They're never gonna see it. Well, that's a great take. Another part may be that an autistic kid would thrive in an Amish community. No electronic beeping sounds, no traffic, and an endless routine. Yeah, obviously, you know, if you're on the spectrum, but it is interesting, and I'm even wrestling with it in my head, that it's a tough thing to grapple with. Is an old school, low tech way of life better for the long term? And if so, what does that mean for the future of our lives? What should we restrict?
Think about what the Amish are doing. First of all, massive sense of community, right? They're very connected. They're not using cell phones. They're not using email. So the community is also based on one-to-one interaction, real social cues, real social interaction, which is critical.
That's super interesting. They have only authentic communication. They're not bogged down with emojis and, you know, oh, there's a period at the end of this sentence. I wonder what that means. There's none of these artificial anxieties that come into play when you're having just real, authentic communication. And in a one-to-one conversation, honestly, from my perspective, I think a lot less about what I'm going to say when I'm in a one-to-one conversation. I'm not hitting the backspace button, rephrasing that sentence, thinking how is it going to be received. It's just off the cuff. And it's more authentic when I speak that way. And I assume it's being received with a higher level of integrity from the other side. When you're only communicating that way, that has to do wonders for your mental health.
It's a big part of being a human being, and it's one of the more absent things in modern society. Two, physical labor. They're involved in a lot of physical labor because they don't use electricity. They don't use power tools. There's so many things that they don't do. So because of their culture, they're making their own homes, all right? So they have a vested interest in helping each other, working together as a community, and they have a deep sense of satisfaction of constructing each other's homes. You construct my home with me. I help you build your home. They take care of their animals. They take care of their crops. There's a real connection with where they get their food from, a real connection with where they live, their community, the sense of just the sense of belonging.
Yeah, I think sense of belonging, I would even take that one step further, and just that their entire community relies on them and they have the ability to be relied on. I think it's so cool, you know, and I get this from, as you know, I go to a church, and part of my church, a big piece of that is the community that's around there. Lots of my lifelong friends I met and I'm friends with because of that church. And having that central community with a bunch of like-minded individuals is so crucial to have this feeling of belonging and this feeling of love and this feeling of sense of purpose and the ability to contribute to life and also have your life contributed to. Man, awesome. So here we go. Let's just ignore the fact that Amish people are of profound faith, which gives them purpose with a tight-knit community. And the men often choose to retire from active labor at 50 years old. Also, they don't have old folks home. They take care of their own. That's a good point. This is really interesting. I think, though, the profound faith is hitting the nail on the head here. All of the works that we can do, we can obviously know the science behind how we were created to work hard, eat well, be healthy, sleep, whatever it's going to be. There will always be a longing in our souls for a connection to the divine, for a connection to God. And I really think that if there were two communities, the Amish as they are today and the Amish without faith, the Amish without faith would be less healthy. Another comment here, the Amish population doubles every 20 years. They are the fastest growing population in America. Shout out to all you big families. We must protect them at all costs. Learn from them and adopt some of their successful lifestyle choices, include the large families, rejecting public school, life of humility, prayer, homegrown food. I am on board with all of this. Large families, reject public school, life of humility, prayer, and homegrown food. We would be better off. The human race would be way better off with this way. But it seems like there might be a dark side. They practice Christianity, but also live by this intense, strict moral code instead of rules.
Like, we didn't have technology, so our house was very quiet. There's no refrigerators running. There's no TV on. So everything you do as a kid, you're playing with blocks where you're using your mind to make your imagination happen, to where kids now will sit and watch a TV for hours and the TV is controlling their imagination, so to speak.
Yep.
So from that aspect, I'm appreciative of it because it did change the way I think. I think a little bit more left brain now. Wife says I'm way different. So
Yeah.
she sees the impact more than I do.
Right.
But then from a religious perspective, I obviously disagree with them and don't want to raise my kids thinking they're going to hell for driving a car.
Yeah, that's interesting. See, this is where I think the majority of faith-based groups get it wrong, is they steer away from the Bible. If you think about virtually every religion starts kind of like the Old Testament, with some different blocks and kind of holes filled in certain places, and they all stem down to a different Messiah. And so you might ask me, well, Adam, you know, if you know this, how could you have landed on Christianity? And it's simple. Christianity is the only one where Jesus comes and says, not by works, but through faith. Now, I know the proof of work mindset, but when we're talking about our ability to be with the Creator at the end of our life, it is much more inspiring to have a Creator that wants to be with us because we loved Him, not because of what we could do.
Can you go back to that community ever? Or are you still friends with people who are Amish or?
I see my dad. I've seen him once in the past 7 years. I probably could see him more if I chose to. But if I was to go hang out there, we were from uber conservative Amish,
Yeah.
like the second most conservative in the United States. So if I was to go hang out at their house, show up there 2 or 3 times a year, they'd probably be like, hey, how about you don't come for a little bit? So,
Yeah, you got to tone it down.
Yeah.
Man, you'd be hard pressed to find that in the Bible where it says, don't hang out with your children. It doesn't say, be fruitful and multiply, and if they follow the rules, hang out with them. It says, be fruitful and multiply and show love and respect. And this is where I start to maybe disagree quite heavily with this way of life.
Yeah. They don't want their kids to see us and go, hey, if he's my uncle and he drives a car, why am I dealing with this horse right now? And he has AC and he doesn't have long hair. So
are you the only one in your family who's broke free from the Amish lifestyle?
No, my mom is broke out. Okay, there's 9 of us total, and I have 4 that are still Amish. So at least 5 of us that are not. So right about split in half.
Okay, so you, your mom, and 3 other siblings. So what was the breaking free process like?
Can't imagine it's an easy process to literally break your family up. I'm not sure what kind of relationship she has with half of her children, her husband. There's a lot of stuff going on there. That's some serious baggage. And so kind of crazy that, a community driven to have, good lifestyle, good health, good, future-proof ability, we could call it, also kind of has this negative side where if you question, if you, maybe try to modernize is the wrong word, but kind of, try to believe what Jesus said is maybe how I would describe it. You get the boot. That's crazy. 2 of my closest friends ran away from an Amish community when they turned 17. Their parents both told them they shouldn't return. There's a lack of grace and forgiveness in the Amish families that doesn't get talked about enough. Yeah, this is the dark side. I think that when you are married to a set of rules, rules ignore a large part of both science and faith, in that, your blood, your family kind of gets allowed a certain level of grace. And so basically breaking this down, what do you think? Do they have a point in restricting their technologies? And I think there is something to be said for that, but ultimately I think that balance is the key here. This man leaving and not being able to thrive in a world, artificially suppressing, making your words smaller because you're scared of things, that feels like a slippery slope. Where does it end? Why even have running water? Why aren't we, walking 10 miles to the river to get our water? And maybe they do, and I'm ignorant here, but it strikes me that we need to find a balance on how much and what technology we use. We should be very adept. We should understand technology to the fullest degree so that we can make, through a set of filters that we have for our life, the best decisions for our families. And on that note, as a Bitcoiner, someone who's deeply interested in building these citadels, lots of Bitcoiners talk about building their citadel and having, the house with the community. I've got an early version of my citadel. I have about 120 acres in central Alberta with a gas well, and I'm beside a dairy farm, and there's a cattle farm, and I'm on some water, and it's like this big house. I often, when I invite friends over, I joke to them and say, yep, this is where the cult begins. But as someone who's interested in that, still like to believe that I'm a believer in balance and of rules, but not rulers. And rules need to be based in your filter. And for me, my filter is the Bible. First and foremost, if a rule doesn't pass the Bible test, frankly, I think it should be thrown away and revisited. Oftentimes, you're looking to solve consequences of not following a biblical narrative or a biblical rule. And so I try to get down to that first principle all the time. And I would love to think that, I could live in a small, decentralized, rulerless world who all were working amongst the same filter. And my preference would be the Bible. And with that filter, that mission on our lives, it might or should, I'll say, be easy to kind of coexist and live together. But what do you think? What's one thing from the Amish lifestyle that could benefit modern society? Or even just take it smaller, that could benefit you and your family? And then on the flip side, what's one thing that you could never, ever give up? As always, my name is Adam. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, this show exists to future-proof our lives. We want to look at our life and understand how to have the best possible life so that we can stay sovereign.